is up, guys? We are here at Team Alpha Male in Sacramento, California. Founded, owned, and operated by UFC Hall of Famer Urijah Faber. We just had an amazing chat on life, success, and chasing a dream. Toured the facility a little bit. Roll the clips.
I've been all right.
See, that's
I've been
the
busy.
uppercut that starts off. Look how he throws himself before go to sleep. Here we see it again. Holding on that leg. Throwing, looking to lock it in. It is all over! Urijah Faber! Winner by submission. Boom! Drops down. Throws it to the ground. Boom! Drops nothing. He's like a lion with a wounded gazelle.
Brian, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate your time.
You got it, buddy.
Yeah, let's get into it. I want to start with understanding where you came from and kind of what a young Urijah Faber looked like.
So, you go way back. My parents were kind of free spirits. I was born in Isla Vista, in a house in Isla Vista, so that's like the party town next to, UC Santa Barbara. And they weren't in school. They were just hanging out, part of a Christian commune, like a lot of good energy, like community living, that kind of thing. And basically just running around naked little kid with all positivity. Ended up moving to Sacramento around 3 years old from Santa Barbara, and have lived in the greater Sacramento area. My parents got a divorce when I was, I think, in kindergarten, and then just split time between two loving parents that were hardworking. We wouldn't have a ton of money, but we had a lot of positivity, and grew up loving contact sports, football, hockey. I used to love watching boxing, and then of course mixed martial arts, and I got into wrestling when I was about 13 years old, and kind of took off from there.
And then you were 13, started wrestling. You wrestled in high school. When was it that you realized you wanted to take, mixed martial arts or the contact sports to the highest you could go to?
Well, when I first started wrestling, it was, the UFC was at an infant stages. It was like 94 were the first fights. I started wrestling right around that time, 95 or whatever. And the first fights had started, and there was no weight limits. There was no regulation. It was just like, kind of like a freak show. And shortly into my college career, it got kind of banned and taken off of like mainstream media. It was like kind of underground and whatnot. And so all through college, I was wrestling in college at UC Davis as a high level wrestler, Division I wrestler, and kind of forgot about it until one of my friends sold me a ticket. He was going to fight at an Indian casino, and it was like $85 to go watch him fight. And I was like, yeah, I'll come check you out. Tyrone Glover was his name. He's a lawyer now. And we had wrestled at different high schools growing up. And so I went and watched him fight and just kind of got hooked. I was like, oh, I know I'm going to do that. So I was in college at the time, 23 years old. And as soon as I graduated, I started taking jiu-jitsu classes and learning a little bit about boxing, and then took a fight like maybe a month and a half after I graduated. So my wrestling career didn't end exactly how I wanted. I was, top 12 in the nation at the peak, and then my senior year I was ranked as high as number 8 in the nation for Division I wrestling, and had kind of a crappy tournament, and I still wanted to compete. So I took my first fight in 2003 on an Indian casino. It was illegal in California, and the rules were different. I could wear shoes, and there wasn't really a weight class for me, and got my first win within a minute and 35 seconds, something like that. And I was like, oh man, I want to do that. Got paid $200 to show up, $200 to win, and I was like, hooked.
Wow. So then what exactly were you chasing, even though the fighting world wasn't a well-established industry at that time?
I mean, it was weird. I mean, really, if you're talking about the sport of mixed martial arts, there wasn't a bright future. There wasn't like a pathway. Like if you're an actor, there's like unions and rule sets and like all these things to take care of you. In the fight world, it was like you could only fight on Indian casinos in 2003. It didn't really hit mainstream and get legalized in California until about 2005. It was still struggling. The guys that owned the UFC at the time, Dana White, Lorenzo, and Frank Fertitta, they had been pouring money in, and their last-ditch effort was to have this reality show called The Ultimate Fighter. They paid for time on Spike TV, and that kind of turned the sport around. So I was like holding on when it was like a pipe dream, and just not really, I was just kind of chasing a dream that didn't have a pathway, believing that it was going to happen, and believing that I could, make something of this, even though there was no weight class for me. There's only 3 events a year, and it just kind of came to fruition where I started making a career doing it.
What were you trying to get out of it?
For me, there was like an internal battle, and I think it changed over time. It was like I always felt like I had this inner belief that I was the man, like, no one could beat me up, and I wasn't even thinking of weight classes. I just held myself on a pedestal when it came to combat. I just wasn't the guy to be messed with, I felt like, and was willing to get out there and prove it. So that was my first internal thing, where it was just kind of enticing to get out and test myself. And also at the time I graduated from UC Davis, I think a substitute teacher at the time, which I was going to do, was getting paid like $13 an hour. And so I got my emergency teaching credential. I was going to start substitute teaching. I was coaching wrestling at UC Davis as a second assistant, making like $7,000, $8,000 a year on salary, which is well below the poverty line. I was busting tables at restaurants. I was coaching little kids wrestling. Started my first business called TLC, doing wrestling camps. So I was working like 16-hour days to be able to fight for, a couple $100 and commission on selling tickets. So I don't really know what I was thinking, other than it sounded like fun, and I felt like I was cheating the system. I had a college degree, but I wasn't like getting in on a career based on a salary. I was just like wanting to have fun and do my passions.
Was this only you doing this, or did you have support behind you, family, friends, whoever it may be? How'd you get to this point? And what are the resources? Who are the people that helped you along that journey?
Man, I had to be really creative. I think, first off, my parents are supportive no matter what. My mom didn't love the idea of me fighting. I didn't tell her until after my first fight. But they weren't supporting me. I was just working myself. I just had like love and support. And then I started recruiting people. Right now I have a team. Team Alpha MMA is one of the best teams on the planet, known across the world. We've had world champions and top contenders, and people come from all over the world to be here in this space. But it would start out with me recruiting my buddies that were tough. Danny Castillo, that I knew from high school, and Scotty Jorgensen, who I wrestled against. We wrestled against Boise State, and he was a tough wrestler at the time. And Matt Sanchez, it was one of my college rivals, and I was just kind of spreading the word about what I was doing, and ended up me recruiting a bunch of like-minded dudes to build a team, and that was kind of a support system that I built in myself, like an extended family that was, chasing the same dreams and kind of pulling resources, and that was like kind of the genesis of building my own support system.
And then how long after that did UFC become established, where you realized this is something I can really, really chase?
So there's a lot of little steps that happen. So I was always lucky. I've got, like, for whatever reason, I've been able to attract some attention. So I was like the first lightweight guy that was getting some eyes on me on a small level. I became a Gladiator Challenge champion, and then a King of the Cage champion, and they were doing like these small pay-per-views, and my face was on posters. And I had my best friend from elementary school, Jamal Yogis, who's a pretty accomplished author at this point. He was in grad school, and he wrote an article about me, and it got put in the New York Times, and then a producer saw that from he was at the time and working at MTV, like coming up with content, and that guy got a hold of me and pitched a show called Say Uncle, which later got stolen and turned into a show called Bully Beatdown, that was on MTV for a while, and that didn't pan out. We went and pitched that a couple times, and he ended up doing a different show called Warrior Nation that was on MSNBC, and that Warrior Nation show like highlighted me at a small fight I had in San Francisco, and it went out to like 50,000 homes, and that was kind of like the beginning of me getting some momentum for the lightweight fighters. That Warrior Nation ended up kind of putting me on on the radar of the UFC brass. The UFC bought the WEC, which was one of the organizations that I held a championship for at the time. Just a small organization. They fought out of Lemoore, California, and at the Tachi Palace. And so the UFC bought the WEC, and the WEC became underneath the UFC umbrella, and they got a TV deal. They got their own sponsors, and I was like the main guy on that promotion. And that promotion was the main show on a new TV station that was called Versus. It used to be the Outdoor Channel, and they changed it to Versus. So it went from the Outdoor Channel, where they're doing like bike riding and rowing in water, like canoeing, to the WEC was their main like thing they're pushing. And then I was the star of that show, and it was all under the UFC banner. So my fights are playing for free all the time on TV. Like, they're just playing reruns of my fights for free over and over and over again. So I got this fan base that was free, and that started to get me, some real legs in the sport. And then it later converted into the UFC, merging with the WC.
Did you know at that point that you were pioneering something, especially the sport of UFC, but in your own division, in your own weight class?
I didn't really think of it like that. I was just, like I said, following my passion and like surviving, but by having fun. And like I was like living the dream. I bought my first house. And, I mean, part of the reason the economy crashed is because someone like me could buy a house back in that day. Like, I did a stated income loan. I had my own business that showed a work history for teaching, because I was teaching kids. And my buddy, my buddy was able, he's like, oh yeah, I can get you a loan. I was making $7,000 a year on paper. I bought a $300,000 house, moved all my buddies in it, and then I started like just making ends meet and having fun. And I was making waves for the lighter weight fighters. I was collecting belts. I had the Gladiator Challenge belt, and I had the King of the Cage belt, and I had the WEC belt, and then the WEC got merged with the UFC, and then I was calling out whoever was ranked. I would just look on the internet and say rankings, and it had like a list of all the people, and I would call out whoever else was on the list at the time. Kid Yamamoto was the big star in Japan, and I'd be like, Kid Yamamoto, what's up? I want to, let's find out who's the baddest guy. And he was on the other side of the planet. And so I didn't realize what I was doing. I was just doing me and trying to say, hey, I'm the baddest dude on the planet, and trying to prove it.
Yeah, I mean, this whole conversation so far, it sounded like success found you early on, and that was a consistent thing in your life. But what sort of obstacles and setbacks did you face early on in your career?
I mean, the biggest setback was that the sport wasn't there yet. And so I know so many people that were badass dudes, wrestlers, fighters, that just couldn't fathom or stomach squeaking by for however long. Right? It takes a special person that can go without, like doesn't need the finer things. And I was, slumming it for a long time, but I didn't feel like it. I was just having fun, hanging out with my buddies, and just going without. So I saw a lot of people just fall off on the big long journey. I stayed the course and believed that something could happen and something would happen. I remember one time I used to make ends meet by doing all these wrestling camps, and I had a wrestling business called Top Line Coaching. I'd do all these different little things coaching kids to make ends meet. And there was a time where my car broke down in Davis, and so I was up in Tahoe. I hitched a ride up there. I was working up there for a month, and there was a car up there that I bought for $300. And I was working a month up at this wrestling camp, and there was a CD. I think that it was Electric 5 or something was the name of the band, and some kid was playing it. I said, what song, what band is that? And he played it for me, and I traded like a bunch of my clothes for a cassette tape that had a wire that went to a CD player and that CD, and it was like, I'm going to be bigger than Jesus and bigger than wrestling and bigger than breast implants and bigger than cigarettes and like all this stuff. And I remember driving home from that wrestling camp, I'd had a couple fights locally and just getting pumped up about like the future that wasn't even there. There was no pathway. And I was driving this $350 car, was selling t-shirts for my clothing company, my Alpha Male Clothing at the time, and just made like $1,100 for a month and a half coaching wrestling kids. And I was just envisioning being rich and famous, being a fighter, and there was like really no opportunity for me. And so like moments like that, I sit back and I'm like, I was a bit delusional. I felt like looking back, and I think that's an important thing. Like, you have to be able to think about things that other people can't see and believe things that other people won't believe. And not get deterred when other people are getting deterred, and not listen to people that are trying to deter you. And that was like a big part of my success, because there's a lot of people, and I can go through name after name of guys that were my same age or younger that fell off or stopped the course, and I just kept on the path.
Wow, I mean, there's so many people that are motivated by the fear of failure today, but there's also the people that are motivated by success and the chance of winning and victory. And is that something that you experienced in your life? You were more towards the victory side?
Yeah, I feel like, and that's true, fear stops people from talking about what they want, from taking the first step, from getting back on the horse after they get kicked off. I mean, there's a lot of things that fear does that is terrible, and I really have to credit my parents in that. My parents were always just like a you can do anything type of mentality, and supported me no matter what, and not like kind of like a loose support system. It wasn't like you have to do this, you have to do that. It was just like impressed with that. I remember my dad being impressed with everything, like just happy for me for this, or just win a match, lose a match, man, that was awesome. Just a constant force of positive energy. And my mom always like encouraging me to write goals down, and giving me helpful hints that in retrospect were kind of strategic, but was more like, hey, if you're really going to do this wrestling thing, then why don't you decide to be the best, and why don't you blah blah blah. I remember having my sister, who was I was 13 when she was born, so I was like 15, 16. She was like 2.5, 3. And I borrowed a little piece of wrestling mat from my coach, and having her, like, teaching her some signals. Like, one was a shoot, one was a sprawl, one was a hand sprawl. And I'd have her, like, she'd put me through stuff. Like, she'd do something and I would react. And that was on the back of my mom being like, I want you to put everything into it, and, just decide you're going to be the best. And I'm like, all right,
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. So back then, who were you fighting for? And did that evolve as you got older, later on in your fighting career?
You mean motivation-wise?
Yep.
Like I said, I remember from a young age wondering if I was the toughest kid in my class or the toughest kid in my age in the world. And then I remember taking into consideration some of the kids in the class above me, because I had done kindergarten twice and shadow boxing in the mirror, even though I didn't have any boxing background. So the first fights were just about me. It was just like something I had to prove, I guess, or something that I wanted to test. I remember my first fight, getting there, not being nervous. I knew I was going to have the fight for about a month. The first time I heard I had a fight, I got goosebumps and got like the hair standing up on my neck and having like a nervous feeling, and then it was all kill mode. And then when I pulled into the arena at the Calusa Casino, I remember like the same thing, being nervous for the first time, and being like talking to myself. I'm like, dude, you've thought your whole life you're like this badass. You're getting nervous, and then like clicked right out of that. And then the last step was walking out to the cage on the first fight and thinking, what the hell are you doing? Like, I signed up to fight this big Mexican guy, bald guy, pride tattoos across his stomach. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, and then I quickly, went into kill mode as soon as the door shut. But remember having these little moments of like, what the fuck are you doing? When no one was doing it.
Yep.
I mean, it was very few people doing it, especially guys that had just graduated college that, had a clean comb over, no tattoos, and was just like in there to prove for myself. So it initially was just me becoming somebody I thought that I was and willing to roll the dice on it. And it morphed throughout my career into what I did for money, bigger goals, into having this, having that, creating this empire that I have now in some ways with real estate and management and other things. You start adding. It's like the law of exposure. You get around people, you see something, and you want more. You see what they have, and you see they can do it, and you want more. You do it yourself, and then you want more. And so that's how things progress. And you get more and more motivated, and you meet more and more people that motivate you, and you have more and more experiences, whether they're good ones or bad ones, that you turn into motivation. So I was able to take everything and use it for motivation and think bigger and bigger, and I'm continuing to do that now.
Wow, that's awesome. So what does success look like to you?
Success for me has a lot to do with freedom, and that's the same with motivation. People always ask me, like, what was the motivation? How did you stay the course? How did you not get burnt out? Which I think is a real cop-out a lot of times when people say they burn out. How did you, come back from this or not get deterred on that? And it really comes down to separating. This is the difference between burnout and people that get what they want, is separating the crappy stuff from what you are shooting for, what you want. And for me, it's been about freedom. My time is freedom. We only have so much on this planet. Freedom to be around the people that I want to be around. Freedom to, now especially, spend time with my kids. The most important thing for me, and I always had that on my goal sheet before I had kids, was be able to spend all my time with my kids on my terms. And my parents were like the opposite. They were all about their kids before they had the resources, so they'd have to bide time between working and making the time with us. And we had great times together, but they always had to pay the bills.
Yep.
And I'm still working, obviously, but it's on my terms. It's not get home from work to see the kids. It's work for a little bit, hang out with the kids, and that's freedom. And that's what I'm going to continue to chase. Now it's into passive income, different jobs that and businesses that allow me to be around things that I love, and continuing to have a life that I dictate and not the other way around.
Sure.
Life dictating me.
But you earned that right to now have the freedom to have the passive income,
Yeah.
to have the time. But in the early days of you chasing up until this point,
Yeah.
do you think you could have done what you did, having kids, being in a marriage, more relationships? Because there's a lot of times the most successful people, there's some collateral damage in their life as a byproduct
Yeah.
of investing so much into their career.
There's people that do it,
Yeah.
but you have to be, focused and determined. Would it have been easy for me? Absolutely not. I was traveling the world, like having fun, enjoying being single, no carefree, can jump on a plane and go to Singapore, can jump on the plane and go to Brazil, can, go wherever the heck I want. And I was mindful about that because I had from a very early age, have this amazing family, kids that I can spend all my time with. And it just kept on passing because it wasn't time for me because I had to focus. Now I've seen some amazing people do that, but they have to be strong-willed just like I was strong-willed to do what I had to do, and they have to make commitments that I wasn't able to make. And it can be done, but for me, I'm pretty happy with waiting until I was 40 to have my kids and be on that path. Now, could I have made it happen? Absolutely. It just would have looked a lot different for me, and I'm glad that I, went the way I did.
Do you have any regrets, from your career?
There's really no regrets. I mean, it would have been nice to have the place that the sport is now be where it was when I was 23 years old, because the rewards were so much higher. But the lessons that I learned from getting paid peanuts to fight at my prime made me an entrepreneur, made me resourceful, made sure that I stayed humble, made sure that I kept the people around me that really matter, some of my best friends from high school and college are, have remained close and tight to me throughout my whole career. Haven't had to go through going from zero to filthy rich and making a bunch of dumb mistakes. I went from having zero to having a little bit, making dumb mistakes, which don't cost you as much, and learning your lessons. So I've got a lot of gratitude for the path that I took. And luckily, because of my lifestyle, which is super healthy and all year engaged in the sport, a consummate professional, I was able to have a 20-year career. If I were to take a fight this time in my life at 43, it would be 20 years as a combat athlete, fighting professionally, on top of a wrestling career that was at a national level. And so for me, I was able to taste some of the new era of mixed martial arts and parlay that into some bigger things, along with the lessons that I learned, thank goodness.
Let's talk a little bit more about you in your prime. Urijah Faber at his best in his prime. What did that look like, both in the octagon, training, and in life?
It was, you're definitely not stopping to smell the roses. You don't look back. You don't look at what's going on at the time. You're like, oh man, this is happening right now. You're just going, But I was a poster boy for a lot of things. Like I said, the UFC had bought a new organization. They were putting a lot of money into it, and I was the poster boy for that. They had their own sponsors, Pepsi being one of them, with Amp Energy and No Fear energy drinks. I was poster boy for that. K-Swiss. I had started some businesses that, I sold a clothing company to K-Swiss back in the day, and was in some pretty cool campaigns, and got to meet a lot of amazing people, from celebrities and other athletes to kids on their dying bed and billionaires, and got to see the world. My time was before Instagram and a lot of the social media stuff, so it was pretty pure. You didn't get to hear as much clatter about people that don't matter.
Keyboard warriors.
Yeah, keyboard warriors. It wasn't really a factor then, so you're not second guessing yourself. You're just you're living a warrior life where the only people that get to talk to you are the people you're training with, or the people that walk up to you on the street. And I kind of missed that a little bit. These new age kids are getting constant input and clouded perspectives from people that don't matter. But it was fun, man. I was literally traveling the world. Those are my only vacations. I didn't take vacations. My vacations were all work vacations. They were fun as hell. And I was training on the road. If anywhere I go in any part of the U.S., in any part of the world, I just get right into the gym and get to work with the baddest dudes, try to sniff out the baddest dude in the area and go head to head with them, whether it be jiu-jitsu or straight sparring or whatever it may be, picking the brains of whoever the gurus were at the time, and then staying the course, and of course having fun.
Yep.
And that was a big part of my success. I knew how to have fun, but not steer off course.
Were there any parts of your life, you look in the mirror, you knew a few things had to change in order for you to really chase your goal and reach your goals?
Change from me, not necessarily. I had to change as an athlete and a mixed martial artist because the sport was getting better and better. I had to progress in all the areas that I wasn't a fish in water. That's boxing, sparring. That takes a long time to get really good at it. So you have to do that. The hard work that comes with feeling comfortable getting punched. That's not an instinctive thing. Wrestling I had done since I was 12, 13, 14 years old. And jiu-jitsu came easy, but learning Muay Thai and the boxing, you had to put yourself in these hard situations that get you primed for really feeling comfortable under combat. I also needed to stay humble and stay focused, because as soon as you start getting notoriety, people come through the woodwork trying to grab your time. And I had to remind a lot of guys in this room, some of them it worked for, some of it didn't, that as soon as you become cool and everybody wants your time, you're going to have the most sales-driven, charismatic people that are trying to get you to do what they're doing because it's easier. That's what happens a lot. These people that fall off or lose, top of the world and then take these dives, they get people that are persuasive and have things that they don't, whether it be monetary or lifestyles they haven't seen, and they try to get you, hey, come over here, come over here, come over here. And I had to make sure that I built an environment that was closed enough but open enough to allow people in but not get pulled out. And I still see that today's day and age. I have to remind this Song Yadong, who's the #1 fighter under 25 in the world, like, hey, these people are going to come and they're going to try to pull you there because it's cool to be with Song, the #1 fighter in the world from China. They want to hang out with you. They want you in their car at their party, doing this and doing that. You said, hey, can we talk? Yeah, absolutely. If we want to continue the conversation, and I start walking and you want to continue this conversation, we're going to walk and talk. If I start running, if I start sprinting, and you want the conversation to go on, you're going to run with me. And the opposite happens a lot of times, and people lose themselves. New friends, new surroundings, new this, new that, new this, new that. That's how guys get lost.
Wow, no, that's an interesting perspective. And so much I see people rise to the top fairly quickly, but to stay at the top is probably the hardest thing you can do. And you see a lot in individual sports, a little less in team sports. What would you say about that, and giving advice to someone, maybe they've reached a lot of success, how to stay humble, how to stay grounded in their values and continue that success, but also keep growing?
I think you have to be, always seeking for ways to better yourself. And it's funny because I've seen a lot of people, and I've heard, people use quotes the wrong way, or at least interpret them the wrong way. And I've seen people come in the room, lose what they were doing as an individual, for regimen, for focus, even the everyday practice, and then think it's the environment and not be internal. You have to be self-aware. And so it's like, oh, I've been in the same place and now I'm having a crappy situation. But what are you doing? Are you now not going to team practices and you just want everybody to watch you hit the bag and not letting yourself be tested by the next up and comer in the room? Or, what is it that you're doing? And staying on top is remembering what got you there. And they say white belt mentality, absolute white belt mentality, but don't, think you've outgrown everything. Dan Gable, who's one of the best wrestlers of all times, one of the best coaches of all times, I had a chance to meet him. My wrestling coach was coached by him and coached alongside him, Coach Lenny Zaleski. And Coach Dan Gable used to come talk to our team at UC Davis, and he said one of his biggest attributes in the world was how gullible he was. If there was somebody that had done it, or he respected, or was a coach or whatever, and they told him to do something, hey, go do this, he would be like, well, does that really work? Blah, blah, blah. He would just do it, and he believed it was going to work. The self-belief, the belief in what you're doing is super important. And now with all these keyboard warriors and outside noise, and people caring about so much about what other people are thinking, sometimes people don't even know or don't even have any kind of qualifications, can eat at your confidence in what you're doing or what you have internally. And so it's getting harder and harder to be gullible and believe in the process. When you don't believe in the process, when you truly don't believe in the process anymore of what you're doing, then you got to change it up. And that doesn't mean that your process is wrong. That means the most important shit is what you believe. Because whether you think you're right or you're wrong, you're correct. Yeah. Whether you think you can or you can't. And I've seen people just stop believing in what they're doing, and either they, go to something else that they believe in that is going to work as well, or they cheat themselves and make something easier. And then that's when they start to lose it, Because it's real easy to talk about, well, I think I had a fighter. I love the guy. He's Hall of Famer also, but he's kind of a wild card. And I remember he had a conversation where he was like, I've decided it's better to be 100% undertrained than 1% overtrained. And he was like, he was saying he's only going to spar once a week. He's only going to train once a week. He's doing this and doing that. And I was like, that sounds like just an easy way out.
Sure.
And they got he got his ass kicked the next 11 fights.
Oh, jeez. Something wasn't right there. But
yeah.
Now you're sitting in this position. You're a UFC Hall of Famer. Your name's everywhere, and you have the opportunity to coach world-renowned fighters.
Yeah.
And especially a lot of young fighters chasing their dream, trying to be, try to hold the belt over their head.
Yeah.
How are you approaching it now that you've been in their shoes, you've done it, you've seen it, you get a third-person perspective? What are sort of the lessons that you want them to learn early on so they never had to go through some of the turbulence that you did?
I think first off, understanding how important it is to always be in the gym and live a lifestyle. So many people, and it happens a lot with the guys that are coming from across the, other parts of the world, where they'll go home, get comfortable, stop on a regimen, and come back and use their training camps to train, to get in shape, or to get back in shape or lose weight, versus like a constant progression towards being a better fighter and staying in shape already. Yeah, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. They have to do that because the best guys are doing that. The hungry kid that's not thinking, no one's telling them, they're just obsessed, and they've got that obsession, they're doing that, and that's who we're competing with. We've got a 15-year-old kid in the room right now, Frosty Cortez, competing every weekend in something. He's in the gym all day, brings his lunchbox, brings his homework. He does the pro practice, and he does the jiu-jitsu practice, and he does a private, and he stays here all day. And that's because he's just obsessed right now, and his body can handle it. That's who we're competing with. So that's one step, is you have to be all year round. And the second thing is realizing that, and this is a lesson that happens more and more these days, is that a lot of times the best salesman becomes the best coach, and I would really lean on people that have done it. And I have a real open door policy with our guys, because I have upwards of 60 guys, 20-something guys plus on the big shows at points, and I'm a coach, but I'm a mentor more than that, and I can't be with everybody and give my time. I've got my family, I've got my businesses, I've got everything else. And we've got lots of other coaches that are in the same scenario. I'm encouraging these guys to fill in the blanks. I'm going to tell you what you need to get really good at. You need to get extremely comfortable striking 8 limbs and in boxing. You have to be able to have skill sets. You've got YouTube. You've got classes every day in this gym. You've got people you can get privates with. You've got your peers that you can drill with. You've got all these different ways to get good. It doesn't have to be me sitting there holding your hand the whole time. I've got affiliate jiu-jitsu programs, guys that used to coach here. I've got probably 5 different gyms that aren't affiliated with me. I have no monetary incentive for them to go there. But if my guys are getting good work there and they feel comfortable getting there, as long as you're showing up to practice, go get that work in with somebody that's giving you their time and is legit, right? These selfish coaches that make it about themselves, you have to watch out for those guys, right? I'm here with a message. You got to get really, really good. You got to be a fish in water at fighting people. You have to be able to be a great wrestler, a great jiu-jitsu player, a great Muay Thai fighter, a great boxer, great at mixing it all together. And I believe I've got the answers. I'm going to show you what I can during practices, but you have to do that yourself. You have to be constantly filling your cup with techniques. You have to read a book. You have to get on YouTube. You have to put in the extra time. You have to hit the bag. You have to pay for privates with your coaches. You have to go seek competitions that are going to test you. If you think it's going to be how much time can you get from me to mold you, first off, that's not the secret. It's not me that's going to be the difference for you. I'm going to help. I'm going to be a big part of your thing. And I hate coaches that make it about themselves and make people think they can't without them, right? Without, if you lose this coach, then you're going to be up shit creek. I would love to be on someone's team for their whole journey, but encouraging them to fill their cup with techniques, and me egging them on and egging them on and egging them on and fueling the fire and building their mentality. The mentality is something that you need. The self-belief, the encouragement to get back on on the horse after you get bucked off. That's what real leadership comes from. That's what real coaching is stoking the fire and building up the fire of a champion. You don't teach champion necessarily. Champions are decided, and then they have to put in the work.
But who was the one teaching you all of this, showing you the ropes, and exposing you to kind of the reality of what it takes?
I've had a lot of mentors. I think probably my first mentor in the MMA space was Randy Couture. I was lucky enough to be in the room with him when he was in his prime. He would hold practices here in Sacramento, and we'd have Tito Ortiz, Frank Trigg, James Irvin, Scott Smith, Quentin Rampage Jackson, all these guys in the room. And Extreme Couture is one of the top gyms in Las Vegas right now. I was there for the early stages of his career and saw how he was doing it. My wrestling coach, Coach Lenny Zaleski, I coached alongside Coach Lenny Zaleski. He just retired. We just had his retirement party this last trip. And in wrestling, it's not as monetary as the fight world is, right? These coaches a lot of times are like, they have to get their pay through a percentage of what you make, and they're fighting with other coaches, they're trying to steal them and this and that. In wrestling, it's pure. You have your head wrestling coach, and he's trying to bring in technicians, get you to go to a wrestling camp here and learn, and hire assistant coaches for different weight classes, and have guest technicians, and highlight what other guys are doing, in a practice that stand out. Like that purity of a coach who's got a salary, but his passion is to teach the next generation what he's learned. That's where I've learned my motivation. That's where I've learned my belief. Wrestling camps. I go to as many wrestling camps as possible. We go to tournaments, and it wasn't about, the coach wasn't getting paid more if I won. He was building a team and trying to get you to win and mold you into a strong person and individual. And for me, that was my lesson.
Wow. Walk me through one of your UFC losses and kind of the roadmap of how you got back on track and how you reframed your mind, to go get the next one, to go win the next one, even though you just faced a tough loss.
Yeah, a big one, and this was a lot of times because you got to remember money's involved in this thing. I feel like I really got slighted by the organization, and I was supposed to be sharing in the pay-per-view of one of the biggest fights of the year. Chael Sonnen versus Anderson Silva was the fight that was supposed to happen. I was supposed to fight Dominic Cruz on that card, get a piece of the pay-per-view. It was supposed to be, $1.5 million in my bank account.
Which Cruz fight? 1, 2, or 3?
Well, it didn't happen.
Oh, it didn't? Okay.
It didn't happen because he got injured. So it would have been number 3, I think.
We were out 3, 199.
Yeah. And this was way before
3,
3, yeah. And it was UFC 100 actually. Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva, and I was not signing a new contract because I didn't like the terms, and I felt like I was getting underpaid. And I got convinced to sign the contract by the UFC brass at the time, with them talking about how much I was going to get paid on this one pay-per-view. And after I signed the contract for a guaranteed purses of 6 fights that was way below what I thought my worth was, because I was going to get this big pay-per-view that was going to be over $1.5 million, they pulled me off of that card because Jose Aldo got injured and made me headline a week after that UFC. And this is after they put a Chael and Anderson card, like them on the event, so that it was going to be me and Dominic and those guys. I signed it once they got moved on there. Once they got moved on, they moved me off and had me headline a fight in Canada against Hanan Barao, who no one knew, who was tough as hell. And I was getting pay-per-view points, but they didn't even barely promote it because they're promoting the UFC 100, and I was a week after. Yep. So they almost acted like I was still on that card, so they get big pay-per-view numbers on that one. And they saved the card by having me go on the other one. And so I got a guaranteed like $120,000. I broke my rib in the first round against Hanan Barao. I had coached the Ultimate Fighter leading up to that against Dominic Cruz, so it was like a 12-month layoff. And then I had a fight where I I had lost the fight, so I got half the money. I got paid like $110,000 or maybe less than that. I don't remember. I think I made like $60,000. Then they gave me a $50,000 bonus. I made like $110,000, and I was supposed to get 100, whatever. And I'd only fought once in 13 months because I broke my rib and I coached this reality show. And then they gave me 3 cars. I won a car for the Ultimate Fighter, and part of my negotiation, they gave me another car, and I won a motorcycle on the Ultimate Fighter because it was a sponsor. So my tax bill was almost what I made for the year.
Sure.
And I just remember being so bitter about that fight. I lost the fight for World Championship. I got paid like peanuts. I was out with a broken rib. I had this tax bill for these free cars, and I remember being like salty and bitter. So I just had to remind myself how much gratitude I had and the things that I had in life. I started going and getting in the ocean. My coach, Fabio Prado, who, like I said, somebody was with me that I never jumped ship on because I was trying to find somebody better that has a new secret technique that was going to get the win. He was like, bro, let's go have fun. We went and we went surfing every couple weeks. Went up to Point Arena and got in the water, and went to San Francisco, got in the water, and just had to have an attitude of gratitude and forget about the money. And I came off and rattled off a bunch of wins in a row. 2013, I think I had 3 or 4 submissions in the year. They counted me out for fighting for a title again, and I got back into title contention. And, just had to make it about positivity and not bitterness.
Wow. Hall of Fame induction. What did it mean to you?
Man, it's funny because I talked about earlier not being a guy that was like smelling the roses during your career. You don't sit there and be like, oh wow, I'm traveling the world, and oh wow, I'm on a bunch of commercials. Like there was a time where you watch anything on TV and you'd see, a commercial for K-Swiss, a commercial for the WEC, a commercial for Amp Energy, a commercial for Versus where they're promoting me. I was like all over the place on media and doing all these things. That was the first time where I was like, wow, I was inducted with people that I had really looked up to, because I had started in the sport late, but I'm a grinder, and I stayed active. I had 46 fights, in my career, and guys like Tito Ortiz and BJ Penn and Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture and these guys. If you look at their stats, I almost have double fights with some of those guys, which is wild to think. But I just started going. Like it was, after my first loss, I think I had 7 fights in 13 months because I was just like fucking going, And so that was like the first time where I was like, fuck, man, I like put it all out there and like did some cool shit. And that was like kind of the first time to sit and smell the roses and be appreciated and appreciate what I had done. But for me, it was just a reminder that I was just getting started on life and the grind. And I've had like a lot of success and a lot of hard times since then in other avenues, and actually came out of retirement and had success, and came out of retirement the second one and had a big loss. And it was super surreal because who I was surrounded by in a moment to sit and reflect, but just a motivator for me, keeping everything as a motivator, not as like take a fresh breath. It was like, all right, killed that phase, let's go to the next phase.
So now you're always looking for the next adventure, success, or whatever it may be.
Yes, and it's been hard. I mean, it's been a lot of battles that are outside of the arena, outside of there, outside of the fight space, that you take the same mentality and you let things fester up. Bad experiences, let them motivate you. Good experiences, let them motivate you. Just be motivated, be positive, and keep grinding.
So then now, fighting career is over, maybe?
Yeah, most likely. I mean, I've had a fight offered. It would be cool to have one fight to make the 20 years straight of as a combat athlete.
Nobody else has done that, right?
I think there have been a couple guys. Yeah, there's some guys that have done that, and in the boxing world, like George Foreman had a 30-year career, and guys like that you look back and look at who they fought, and just think about that. When he was at the beginning of his career, and some of the guys that he fought, they're at the end of their career, and you go down the line, there can be like a connection of 150 years of somebody that's fought somebody that you fought.
That's crazy.
That's fucking wild. And I like that kind of thought process. George Foreman fought for 30 years. Say at his prime he fought somebody that fought for even 15 or 20 years. That person fought somebody, and it gets real easy to pass down the line where, this current champion has touched this champion from the 1900s, early 1900s, generational stuff. That's what's cool about our sport.
Okay, so then let's segue just a little bit away from you fighting.
Yeah.
What's your dream? Like, what are you chasing now? Is it your legacy? Is it a huge portfolio of different entrepreneurial things? Like, what's getting you going?
I have to curb my ambition sometimes when I remember like what's important, and kids are great for that. I feel like I've slept better since I've had kids than I ever did as a young, hungry guy, just because I think there's a little piece that's a lot more content for whatever reason. Just going to bed knowing that like that big piece is checked off. But for me, it comes down to freedom still, the ability to live the life that I want. And I look towards guys like, in our community especially, guys that I look up to are guys like a Pete Jeremia or a John Saka or, these guys that have worked their butts off, are continuing to work their butts off, but on their terms.
Finish line is nowhere near.
Yeah. No, yeah. And could they cash in and just sit on the beach? Absolutely. But they're thinking about their kids. They've built a regimen and lifestyle of hard work and ambition and not being satisfied. And for me, it comes down to, first and foremost, being someone that has something that I'm excited about. And right now, I've just put the front of my building into an acai shop. I'm going to do that acai shop. I've got a truck that I'm turning into a van life. I've got a retreat gym business that I'm, on one of my properties on the northern coast that I'm putting some money into now, and want to start really pumping up that other stuff. I want to build things that are cool. I just had my A1 Combat fight organization. We had our huge event, and I got to see my buddy MC Hammer, who I looked up to as a kid, cage side, and Gary Payton, who's one of the most legendary basketball players from Northern California there, sideline, and the next generation of fighters that got to fight in it. And so I'm building all these things that are super fun, that are around my passions, things that I love. Healthy food. Acai is one of my favorite things. I named it after my daughter, Callie Acai, so there's a legacy there. I own this building in the real estate here, which is a big win for me, and I've got now another little play there. The truck, I get to have some great times with my kids, but also use it as a double for business. Going to grappling or some of these fight organizations, or holding acai events, having my guys take the van life down and work at an event. So trying to tie in all my stuff so that I'm making a life that I love to do, but having fun with it. And that's really going to be the goal. The crappy thing will be having to do stuff I don't want to do. And I mean, again, what I've been a master of is separating the crappy stuff from the stuff that I want. And so it makes it not crappy. You want to get up early in the morning? I don't like to get up early in the morning. But I will get up.
Yep.
Because I want my shit in order. I want to be able to take my kids if I want to, and just go for a vacation if I want, So that's my motivation. That's the goal.
How important is it to take risk in your life?
Risk is huge, and I would like to say it was all calculated risk, but it really wasn't. It's like an inner confidence and not being afraid to fail. You have to sometimes not care what people think, which is pretty easy once you realize that you're the only one that knows your limits. But taking risks are massive. And I've had so many people be like, oh man, everything you touch turns to gold. And I'm like, yeah, right. I could go off a list of things that have not worked. And most of the time it's when I'm the most intelligent person who's carrying the biggest load to do it. You got to take big risks and then also stay in your lane. Because I've seen some, they call them shoelace millionaires, that have success in one area and think they can do anything and try to do everything. Right? You got to stay in your lane, and I'm pretty good at understanding my strengths and my weaknesses.
One more topic before we get into the rapid fires. If you could write a letter just to your younger self, what sort of stuff would be in there? What would you tell young Urijah? Are there any, you've already said you don't have any regrets, so it's nothing that you want to do over.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Younger self, I would say, know your worth a little bit more. I'm a very easy guy to deal with sometimes. Sometimes you got to stand your ground a little bit more. I would say that, especially when you're working with professionals that really understand negotiations and whatnot, and you're not stopping to smell the roses, you don't understand how valuable you are. So I would say, Urijah, hey, know how valuable you are, know your worth, and make sure that you get yours, because there's been a lot of times where I haven't. The other thing would be just remember to cherish the people and take care of the people that are really good people. And you can make mistakes in that, but I feel like, especially when you're running and gunning and people, the more success you have, the more people want to do stuff for free, and sometimes you forget to really be thankful or overcompensate, somebody who's helped you out a lot. And so I would remind myself to do that a little bit more.
Oh, amazing. A few questions. These are quick ones. Which fight do you wish you could redo?
I wish I could redo my fight with Mike Brown where I broke my hand, and where I did a jumping back fist, the very first one I lost. Both those were fights that I feel like I should have and could have won. Now, not taking anything away from Brown. He was more than prepared, and he's obviously an amazing fighter and now an amazing coach. So, but I just feel like those fights were pivotal fights that saw me getting the belt back. I never got the belt back. I chased it for 8 or 9 years. Well, more than that, for 12 years, and got really close a lot of times. But not losing that belt and then getting it back. Another one I think I could have. I don't think the Dominic Cruz fights, the second one especially, I feel like I had maybe done enough to win, depending on what you're looking at. I don't think I could have redone that one and done it better per se. But the third one, I think I could have done a little better. I think I didn't give him enough respect because he had made some improvements in power, and I just remembered a guy that I felt could not hurt me, like the first time where I felt like his punches weren't there, and he was more dangerous the second time around. And I feel like I definitely could have fought smarter in that fight. And the last one was probably Peter Yan, my very last fight, who was a guy that I feel like I had a good little game plan for, and again got too comfortable, too cocky, and let my guard down for a split second, and he was high level enough to take advantage of it. And again, that's a fight that I wanted to take because
That was here, right?
that was
Second to last
in Las Vegas. The one here was a big one against Ricky Simone, like
That
a
was
46
so-called your last fight.
Yeah, that was my last fight was here against Brad Pickett, and I beat him.
Yeah.
I almost finished him in the first, and then my out of retirement fight was here against Ricky Simone, and that was a big win. I lost to Peter Yan, and went on to be the 2-time world champ.
I remember.
And he rocked me in the second, and I came in, and then he put me out in the third. Only time I've ever been actually knocked out in a fight. And I wanted that fight for the same reason I talked about the Foreman situation, where he fought for 30 years. I was 40, he was 25 or 24, 26, something like that. And I was like, this Peter Yan, all he knows is fighting, and he's going to be fighting probably till he's 40 years old. And I knew he was going to be a motherfucker in the division.
Yep.
And I was like, I want to fight this guy, beat this guy, and then have been the guy that fought him, the last guy he fought, and then carry that on and go back down. Or I fought Jens Pulver, who was the first UFC world champion, who fought BJ Penn, who fought, you know, all the guys in Japan, and Matt Hughes, and Matt Hughes fought these guys, and like on and on. Ivan Menjivar was the first fight against George St. Pierre, and like, you know, just the whole list of guys that you've touched from 100 years to 100 years, you know.
Wow. All right, describe Urijah Faber in 3 words.
Positive, tough, scattered. I try to fit a lot in a day, but I could be a lot more organized, and that's why I have some great people around me that are not scattered.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, what's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear, I've never been really a fearful type of guy.
Don't tell me you like sharks or snakes.
No, I've swam with sharks. I'm not, but I hate turbulence. But I fly so much that I'm over that. I guess at this point my fear would all be around my kids and them getting hurt.
Yeah, fair enough. Last one. What's the proudest moment of your career?
I would say probably the proudest moment of my career was my retirement fight, just because they did a big caught me off guard with like a whole like segment and everything else. I remember getting teared up backstage and like having to like refocus.
Like
and
a video or something on the
yeah, it was a video, and everyone in the room just stopped and got quiet and watched it, and I'm like trying to warm up and everything, and it was just a really cool event to see Sacramento turn out. And I've had all my favorite fights were in Sacramento, and had some really big wins, some big losses, but that was extra special because I really felt celebrated.
Perfect. Dude, thank you so much.
Yeah.
No, this is amazing.
Yeah, you got it.
There's so much I learned about your life that you don't hear, see, or even get to unfold.
Yeah.
Until you're one-on-one having a conversation like that. So thank you.
You got it, man. And I always like to say, you know, like that analogy I said about sitting down, walking, running. You know, when you want to learn about something, I encourage people to go in and ask somebody, because you know, most successful people are honored to be able to talk about it.
I think the biggest thing is, like, recently I've just become so obsessed with putting people way above me on the success charts or the, you know, rankings, whatever it may be, people that are better than me in my circle.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way I'm going to grow.
Yeah.
You've been a mentor to me for, I think, ever since I met you at Jeremiah's. So
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate everything you've done.
You got it, man. And I don't know how much you do reading, and I don't do as much as I should, but Napoleon Hill was a great guy to do some research on. His job was to do what you're doing right now, and I've wanted to do the same thing, and I've kind of done it on my own. It's not my job, but you know, you pick people and you learn about them, and he was a guy that got to be with the most successful people of his time, and his job was to figure out what makes them tick, find commonalities in them, and that's what you're doing now. So go check out Napoleon Hill.
I will.
And I think his most well-known book is Think and Grow Rich.
Yep.
But he's got a bunch of great ones.
Yeah.
And in research, like he's doing what you're doing, which is just finding people. You have the ability to get in front of them and pick their brain. It's pretty awesome.
Someone told me the other day, your network is your future's net worth.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to take advantage of my network, but I think I've built such a cool relationship with so many people, and that's one of my strengths and values that I like most about myself, is I can connect with a lot of people of all backgrounds.
Yeah.
Sports has given me that ability, whether I'm playing with guys from South Africa or England. I've just experienced so many types of people.
Yeah.
But I'm obsessed with learning about their life and how they've gone from start to finish, and all the lessons that they can start teaching other people.
Yeah, and here's something, and you can take this because, you know, you and I've known you since you're a kid, really. And I wrote about this in my book, actually, and it's building your own Who's Who network. And I've done it. And I said in my book, like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I know Urijah Faber, but you know, or I know so-and-so, I know so-and-so. But you find people that have the attributes for success, and then you help them become who they are, and that's a real network. Like, I'm here with you right now. Hopefully this goes well for you, turns into something bigger, or whatever you're going to do. I know you're going to do big stuff, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I know him. Like, that's my boy. I've known him since high school, and I was there for the beginning of it. And that's the way it's been for this team. It's been like that for my college buddies, a lot of my high school buddies. Like, we've been there from the beginning, and it's like, oh yeah, Joseph Benavidez, who could be a Hall of Famer here, fought for multiple world championships, and Chad Mendez, who's a legend in the sport, and you know, Cody Garbrandt. Like I saw those guys when they're amateurs. I recruited Chad out of high school to come wrestle, and we became friends at wrestling camps during college, and he was there for my first fights. And I'm like, oh, you know Chad Mendez, and you know Mark Munoz, and you know this person, that person, this person, Cody Garbrandt, blah blah, like these who's people. And I'm like, I don't just know them, like, we helped each other get there.
Yeah, we've been through stuff.
Yeah, and that's a real network. It's not like, I want to meet him because of this, I want to meet him because of that. No, you meet people with the attributes, and you help each other get to that next level, and that's a real network. And that's what all these real estate guys have done. You know, the Petes and the John Sakas, and they all know each other, and they've done deals together, or picked each other's brains, and you know, and we'll continue on that path. And we're all old and gray. We're gonna be balling.
Yeah.
You know,
there's nothing cooler than having a network of friends that are good buddies, that are loyal, because loyalty is one of the harder things you come by in today's age. But accomplishing shit together.
Yeah.
It's not you versus me.
Yeah.
And I think the more you know how to work with a team and use your strengths versus to complement my weaknesses, that's when it's real.
Yeah, absolutely. Building a who's who network.
Epic.
Killer, buddy.
Doing my
Good,
best.
man.